Well, I got my notes, check. Sunglasses, check. Hat, check. Pepsi, check. Thick skin, check. Let's go. Hey, welcome to Golden Blue Dude, everybody. If you're a college football fan, might as well hit the like and subscribe button because that's all we do over here. Go check out our Patreon page. We call our Patreons the shot callers because that's exactly what they do around here. And when the regular season gets here, our Patreons will get to decide which game we'll live stream, and you'll get to watch with Golden Blue Dude. And the score prediction contest will be coming back. Every week I pick out a game and my Patreons guess the score, and whoever comes closest to the score wins $20 every single week, and you can win as many times as you want. The higher the Patreon, the more guesses you get per week. What an absolute mess conference realignment has created with college football. I think whenever the dust settles, it's going to resemble something that we don't even recognize. That there's been transitions. You can talk to the older people that went through earlier transitions. Going through change in college football is rough, but once you get to it, you do eventually adapt. But we're going to be that generation where we're going to be like, you remember the good old days whenever the players didn't used to play for money and whenever it was regionalized and none of this pay-for-play stuff is going on? Yeah, that's going to be the generation. That's going to be our generation. We're going to be talking about this change. By the way, yesterday we did hit 8,000 subscribers. In fact, we blew past 8,000 subscribers. We're up over 8,200, so I greatly appreciate that. But let's keep it climbing. 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year is looking really, really doable right now. So if you're a college football fan, make sure to hit the subscribe button and get us to 10,000 subscribers. The sooner, the better. So it's becoming old news that USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten. We already know that. The main thing now that everybody's trying to figure out is which out of the three remaining conferences between the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC are going to remain. We already know the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to be fine. They're going to keep building and building and get the best brands, and eventually they'll probably separate the rest of college football from the NCAA and create their own conference. But I think there's a possibility that there's a third conference that breaks off with them. The question is, will it be the Pac-12, the Big 12, or the ACC? Well, honestly, I think the Pac-12 is off the board. Sorry, Pac-12 fans. I think the days of the Pac-12 are numbered. So I think you guys are not going to exist in the future. So really, it comes down to the Big 12 and the ACC. Now, we've already heard that the Big 12 is looking into Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, and perhaps Oregon and Washington. And honestly, for the Big 12, they really need to lock down Oregon and Washington because eventually the Big 10 and the SEC probably will grab out of necessity Oregon and Washington. That would be a big, massive get for the Big 12. But the Big 12 would also probably need to look towards the ACC and pick some teams off the ACC. The ACC's in a similar boat. They need to expand if they want to survive. Now, we already know that Virginia, North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State have been talking to the SEC. And rumor has it that they are going to leave for the SEC. And a lot of people are like, well, if that happens, that's finito. The ACC is over. Not so fast, my friends. Not so fast. Even if the SEC does get those 4 brands and even adds 2 more brands, let's say a Virginia Tech and a Miami, I still think the ACC still has hope. And it comes down to one brand, and that's Notre Dame. Notre Dame could single-handedly save the ACC. Now, I don't know if this is what's going to happen, but this is how they could save the ACC. So let's say the SEC does get those 6 teams. Well, for the grant of rights to be broken and be voided and be invalid, I did some research and the magic number is 8 for the ACC. So 8 teams would have to leave for that to be voided. Now, if the ACC loses 8 teams, I don't see Notre Dame saving the day for the ACC. I think that's a little too much of a loss for the ACC. I would say 6 would be the most. But I think the SEC has some big-time lawyers that are trying to work around that grant of rights for the ACC to get those teams sooner rather than later. And I'm sure that they don't want 8 teams from the ACC, 6 at the most. But from what I'm hearing, Notre Dame is actually rooting for those lawyers to find a way around those grant of rights. Because what Notre Dame and NBC, from what I'm being told, I don't know if this is really what's going to happen or not, is NBC actually wants to swoop in through Notre Dame and grab the grant of rights and TV deal for the ACC. That would actually change everything for the ACC. So it wouldn't necessarily be bad news that those brands would go to the SEC. I mean, that's some big losses. But if NBC through Notre Dame comes in and swoops in, gets the grant of rights and a really good TV deal for the ACC, then that would be attractive to other brands. So even though they would be shrunken down to 8 teams, they could actually go out and get a West Virginia, maybe a Cincinnati, maybe a UCF, maybe a Houston, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, the Kansas schools, the Texas schools. All of those teams would now be in play because NBC would be a big-time backer for the ACC, and it would be a new player in the game. And honestly, I think that's what college football needs. College football needs a new player in the game because ESPN is taking over. Fox is kind of taking their hands off the Pac-12. They're not even bidding on a new contract. They're still in with the Big 12, but nothing to brag about right now. Maybe they could actually do a better TV deal with the Big 12. We'll talk about that in another video. But NBC is a definite big-time wild card. And right now they have the exclusive rights to Notre Dame. That runs out in 2025. What I've been seeing and what I've been hearing from Notre Dame boards is that Notre Dame is extremely interested in joining full-time in the ACC in 2025 when that TV contract runs out. And NBC actually wants to take over the entire ACC as far as grant of rights and TV market. Another thing about this is Notre Dame has a lot of pride. We all know that they love being independent. That is a feather in their cap right now. Now, if you don't think that it wouldn't be important to Notre Dame to be labeled as the savior of the ACC, and if this scenario were to happen, Notre Dame would most definitely be labeled the savior of the ACC. If you don't think that that title is not important to Notre Dame, then you're fooling yourself. That would be a huge feather in the hat of Notre Dame, and they would wear that proudly. I definitely think this is possible. I don't know how probable it is, but if you look at the entire picture, what we've heard from several months ago, what we've heard now, and what could happen, it actually does fit in with the big picture. As far as I've been hearing Notre Dame and West Virginia, the ACC, for over a year, and yes, I have been dogged and trashed on for that. And I get it, I understand, y'all know I can take it. Then more recently, I heard that talks between Notre Dame and the ACC were heating back up and that they're very interested in joining the ACC by 2025. And this would make even more sense, especially with brands that are thinking about going to the SEC and the grant of rights being done away with. NBC could come in and they could have their own grant of rights with the ACC teams, and it would be through Notre Dame. I would actually like this to happen because I don't know about you, but I like choices. I like variety. I think it's a bad deal if college football shrinks the amount of teams in the upper echelon as far as breaking away from the NCAA and creating their own conference league, whatever you want to call it, and their own playoffs and national championship. If they shrink it down to 30, 40 teams, that's not going to be as fun to watch. It's just not. I mean, look at soccer. They tried to do that over there in the European leagues, and it fell flat. Look, I understand what the concept is. You want just the cream of the crop brands up competing for the national championship. I understand the concept, but you still want variety. You still want these mid-tier brands that at least have a chance to get to the playoffs and win a national championship. And if they shrink it down to 30, 40 teams, that's just not going to happen. And to be honest with you, it's not going to be much different from watching the NFL. I'm just going to flat out and say it. If the SEC and the Big Ten break off with 20 teams apiece, that's a total of 40 teams, you're basically just going to be watching NFL Junior. And yes, it will get boring, and you will regret supporting that idea. Now, if they expand to, say, 32 teams apiece, and there's 64, that's more doable. I would actually be okay with that. I'm just not sure that the SEC and the Big Ten are willing to go to the number of 32 apiece. But 32 would be fine. That would include basically all of FBS teams, and at least they would all have a chance. Y'all let me know in the comments section, how crazy is this? Could Notre Dame and NBC come in and be the savior of the ACC, even if up to 6 teams get picked off and go to the SEC? If Notre Dame and NBC go to the ACC and get the grant of rights, that could be actually more attractive for other teams that are, say, in the Big 12. Then you have a Memphis out there, you have a Boise State out there. I think you'd have a lot of options if you have NBC and Notre Dame backing the ACC. So y'all let me know, what do you think about this idea? Do you think it's doable? And how probable do you think this situation would be? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.